Playing with Power MTG. Powerful cards, powerful formats. Be sure to check out Dragon Shield for all of the best accessories to protect your decks. TCG Player for cards at great prices while supporting local game stores. And Patreon, where you get awesome benefits for your direct support. We are back for another Legacy gameplay video. If you enjoy our videos, please subscribe to our channel. It only takes a second, costs nothing to do, and goes such a long way in helping us out. If you'd like to help out financially, consider signing up to our Patreon, buying some merchandise, or purchasing from the TCG Player links in the description below. Now, let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, we have Mike piloting Infect. Much like the modern equivalent, this deck seeks to land cheap Infect creatures, pump them, and get to 10 poison counters as quickly as possible. Mike's opening hand contains an Invigorate, Inkmoth Nexus, Noble Hierarch, Verdant Catacombs, Tropical Island, Prismatic Ending, and his London Mulligan is a Force of Will. Next, we have Adam piloting Enchantress. This deck seeks to land an Enchantress effect, draw a ton of cards, and then close out the game with a large game-ending spell. Adam's opening hand contains an On Thin Ice, Abundant Growth, 2 Destiny Spinners, Wooded Foothills, Snow-Covered Forest, and his London Mulligan is a Utopia Sprawl. Without further ado, let's kick off this morally misleading monstrosity of misguided mischief. Mike wins the Smallest Hands Challenge and gets to start us off. Mike plays a Tropical Island. He casts a Noble Hierarch. Mike passes. Adam draws a card for turn and plays a Snow-Covered Forest. He casts an Abundant Growth. It enters and Adam draws. Adam passes. Mike draws and plays an Inkmoth Nexus. Mike ends his turn. Adam draws and plays a Wooded Foothills. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Snow-Covered Forest onto the battlefield. He casts Destiny Spinner. Adam gives the turn to Mike. Mike draws and plays a Verdant Catacombs. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Savannah onto the battlefield. He casts Prismatic Ending, exiling Destiny Spinner. He activates Inkmoth Nexus, turning it into a creature. He attacks Adam with his Inkmoth. Noble Hierarch's Exalted triggers, and Inkmoth gets +1/+1. Adam takes 2 Infect, and Mike passes back to Adam. Adam draws and plays a Bayou. He casts Wild Growth. He casts Argothian Enchantress. He casts On Thin Ice. Argothian Enchantress triggers, and Mike responds by casting Daze for its alternate cost, returning Tropical Island to his hand. On Thin Ice is countered, and then Adam draws through Enchantress. With nothing else, Adam passes. Mike draws and plays a Tropical Island. He moves to combat and animates Inkmoth. He attacks Adam with Inkmoth, Hierarch triggers, and Inkmoth gets +1/+1. Adam takes 2 more Infect, and in Mike's second main phase, he casts Blighted Agent. Mike ends his turn. Adam draws and casts Destiny Spinner. Argothian triggers and Adam draws. He casts Wild Growth, drawing from Argothian again. He casts another On Thin Ice, drawing from Argothian. It resolves and exiles Mike's Blighted Agent. He casts Abundant Growth. Argothian triggers and Adam draws. Abundant Growth resolves and he draws again. He plays a Serra Sanctum for turn. Adam gives the turn to Mike. Mike draws and animates Inkmoth Nexus. He moves to combat and, in response, Adam flashes in a Cast Out, drawing from Enchantress. It enters, triggers, and targets Noble Hierarch. In response, Mike floats a white. Then Hierarch is exiled. Mike attacks Adam with Inkmoth. Adam takes it, and in his second main phase, Mike plays a Tropical Island. Mike ends his turn. Adam draws and casts Enchantress's Presence, drawing off of Argothian. He plays a Snow-Covered Forest. He casts Abundant Growth, drawing through 2 Enchantresses, and then drawing off Abundant Growth itself. He activates Destiny Spinner, turning his Snow-Covered Forest into a creature with Trample, Haste, and +10/+10. He attacks Mike with the land and Destiny Spinner. Mike takes it, and Adam passes. Mike draws and animates his Inkmoth Nexus. He moves to combat and attacks with his Inkmoth. Adam declares no blocks, and in response, Mike casts Invigorate for its alternate cost, gaining Adam 3 life. Inkmoth gets +4/+4, Adam takes 5 Infect, dies, and Mike wins the game. Before Game 2, Mike moves to sideboard. He removes 2 Spell Pierce, a Daze, and a Glistener Elf. He puts in 2 Swords to Plowshares to better deal with the large attackers coming his way. He puts in 2 Force of Vigor to better deal with Adam's enchantments. Adam also moves to sideboard. He takes out Conclave Tribunal and a Doomwake Giant. He puts in 2 Carpet of Flowers to generate more mana each turn and accelerate faster against Mike's deck. In this game, Adam's opening hand contains an Enchantress's Presence, Sithis Harvest Hand, Argothian Enchantress, On Thin Ice, Prismatic Vista, and 2 Snow-Covered Forests. In this game, Mike's opening hand contains a Force of Vigor, Prismatic Ending, Daze, 2 Inkmoth Nexus, Verdant Catacombs, and his London Mulligan is a Daze. And Adam gets to start us off. Adam plays a Snow-Covered Forest and passes. Mike draws and plays a Verdant Catacombs. He passes. Adam draws and plays another snow-covered forest. He casts Argothian Enchantress. In response, Mike cracks his Verdant Catacombs, pays a life, and fetches up a tropical island onto the battlefield. He casts Daze for its alternate cost, returning Tropical Island to his hand. Enchantress is countered, and Adam passes the turn. Mike draws and plays a Tropical Island. He ends his turn. Adam draws and plays a Prismatic Vista. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a snow-covered plains onto the battlefield. He casts Sithis, Harvest's Hand. Adam gives the turn to Mike. Mike draws and plays a Verdant Catacombs. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Savannah onto the battlefield. He casts Prismatic Ending, exiling Sithis. Mike passes. Adam draws and plays a Bayou. He casts Enchantress's Presence. He casts Carpet of Flowers. Enchantress triggers and Adam draws. It resolves and Adam gives the turn to Mike. Mike draws and plays an Inkmoth Nexus for turn. He gives the turn to Adam. Adam draws, and in his first main phase, he has 1 green through his Carpet of Flowers. He casts Green Sun Zenith where X equals 2. He fetches up an Argothian Enchantress onto the battlefield and shuffles Green Suns back into his library. He plays a Windswept Heath for turn. He cracks it and pays a life. In response, Mike casts Force of Vigor, exiling Crop Rotation, destroying Enchantress's Presence and Carpet of Flowers. Then Adam fetches up a snow-covered forest onto the battlefield. He casts Green Sun Zenith, where X equals 2 again. He fetches up a Destiny Spinner onto the battlefield, shuffling Green Suns back into his library. Adam passes back to Mike. Mike draws and plays another Inkmoth Nexus. He casts Noble Hierarch. He animates his Inkmoth and attacks Adam. Exalted triggers and Inkmoth gets +1/+1. Adam takes 2 Infect, and Mike passes the turn. Adam draws and casts On Thin Ice, drawing from Argothian. It enters and exiles Noble Hierarch. He plays a Prismatic Vista. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a snow-covered forest onto the battlefield. He activates Destiny Spinner, animating one of his forests. He attacks Mike with his forest and Destiny Spinner. Mike takes it, and Adam ships the turn to Mike. Mike draws and plays an Inkmoth Nexus. He casts another Noble Hierarch. He animates an Inkmoth and moves to combat. He attacks Adam with his Inkmoth. Exalted triggers and Inkmoth gets +1/+1. Adam takes 2 Infect, and Mike gives the turn to Adam. Adam draws and casts Sithis, Harvest Hand, drawing through Argothian. He plays a snow-covered forest. He casts Enchantress's Presence, drawing through Sithis, gaining a life, and drawing through Argothian. He casts Wild Growth, drawing 3 cards and gaining a life. He moves to combat and attacks Mike with Destiny Spinner. Mike takes it, and Adam passes the turn. Mike draws and plays a Tropical Island. He animates and attacks Adam with all 3 of his Inkmoths. Adam takes 3 Infect, and Mike passes back to Adam. Adam draws and casts On Thin Ice, drawing 3 cards and gaining a life. It enters and exiles Mike's Noble Hierarch. He casts Utopia Sprawl, drawing 3 cards, gaining a life, and naming white as it enters. He casts another Utopia Sprawl, drawing 3, gaining a life, and naming white as it enters again. He casts an Abundant Growth, drawing 4 and gaining a life. He casts On Thin Ice, drawing 3, gaining a life, and exiling no creatures since Mike has none. He casts Abundant Growth, drawing 4 cards and gaining a life. He plays a Serra's Sanctum for turn. He taps Sanctum for 12 and casts Emrakul, the Aeon's Torn. It resolves and Adam gets an extra turn. Adam moves to his next turn. Adam draws and moves to combat. He attacks Mike with Emrakul. Then Mike concedes the game to Adam. Before game 3, Mike moves to sideboard. He takes out 2 of his Force of Vigors. He puts back in his Glistener Elf and Daze. This allows him to be more aggressive on the play and close out the game before Adam builds up his board state. Adam has no sideboard changes. In this game, Adam's opening hand contains a Nether Void, Enchantress's Presence, Argothian Enchantress, Wild Growth, Green Sun Zenith, Prismatic Vista, and a Serra's Sanctum. In this game, Mike's opening hand contains a Noble Hierarch, Brainstorm, Blighted Agent, Daze, Wasteland, Inkmoth Nexus, and a Misty Rainforest. And Mike gets to start us off. Mike plays a Misty Rainforest. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Tropical Island onto the battlefield. He casts Noble Hierarch and gives the turn to Adam. Adam draws and plays a Prismatic Vista. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a snow-covered forest onto the battlefield. He casts Wild Growth. In response, Mike casts Daze for its alternate cost, returning Tropical Island to his hand, countering Wild Growth. Adam ends his turn. Mike draws and plays a Tropical Island. He casts Blighted Agent. Mike ends his turn. Adam draws and plays a snow-covered forest. He casts Argothian Enchantress. He passes. Mike draws and casts Brainstorm. He draws 3 and puts 2 back on top. He plays an Inkmoth Nexus for turn. He moves to combat and attacks Adam with his Blighted Agent. Exalted triggers and Agent gets +1/+1. Adam takes 2 Infect and Mike passes the turn. Adam draws and casts another Argothian Enchantress. He plays a Serra's Sanctum and passes. Mike draws and moves to combat. He attacks Adam with Blighted Agent. Exalted triggers and Agent gets +1/+1. Adam takes 2 more Infect, and in his second main phase, Mike plays a Wasteland for turn. He cracks it, destroying Adam's Serra's Sanctum. Mike ends his turn. Adam draws and plays a Snow-Covered Forest. He casts Enchantress's Presence. Both Argothians trigger, and Adam draws 2 cards. Adam ends his turn. Mike draws and plays an Inkmoth Nexus. He moves to combat and attacks Adam with Agent. Exalted triggers and Agent gets +1/+1. Adam takes 2 Infect, and Mike passes the turn. Adam draws and casts Wild Growth, drawing 3 cards through Enchantress. He casts another Wild Growth, drawing 3 more. He plays a Snow-Covered Forest. He casts Abundant Growth, drawing 4 cards. Adam casts On Thin Ice, drawing 3 cards. It enters and exiles Mike's Noble Hierarch. He casts Sanctum Weaver, drawing 3 cards. Adam passes, discarding to hand size. Mike draws and plays a Verdant Catacombs. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Savannah onto the battlefield. He casts Swords to Plowshares, exiling Sanctum Weaver. He animates one of his Inkmoths and moves to combat. He attacks Adam with Agent and Inkmoth. Adam takes 2 more Infect, and Mike passes the turn. Adam draws and casts Utopia Sprawl, drawing 3 cards and naming white as it enters. He casts Wild Growth, drawing 3 more. He casts Utopia Sprawl, drawing 3 cards and naming green as it enters. After not finding what he wanted through the cards he drew and seeing he's dead on board to Mike, Adam passes, discarding to hand size. Mike draws and plays an Inkmoth Nexus. He activates his 2 other Inkmoths, swings out at Adam, and Mike wins the game. Ladies and gentlemen, what an interesting set of games. Congrats to Mike on his win. In Game 1, Mike's Inkmoths, Noble Hierarchs, and well-timed removal helped close it out. In Game 2, Adam's ability to gain a lot of card advantage and mana turned it into a snowball effect. He landed a giant Emrakul and took out Mike in one fell swoop. In Game 3, Mike was able to apply pressure and keep Adam from snowballing by removing key pieces at the right times. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. What do you think the most valuable card was in this match? Was it Argothian Enchantress, Inkmoth Nexus, Noble Hierarch, or something else? Let us know in the comments below. If you like this Legacy video, consider sharing it with a friend, hitting the like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell to be notified when we put out more videos. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time. Alright, Patreon shoutout time. I'd like to give a shout out to Cameron James, Ricky Undercuff Fleur, Justice for Dak, Gabriel Adams, Thomas Thurber, Katarina, Noah Queerswell, Nod Noodle, Nicholas Tatum, Anton Oberg, Tom Spackman, Ryan Wright, Otto Von Trapp, Ivan, Connor Holtz, Nathan Smith, Willow Lysander, Pyro, Dark, Philip Hickey, Jacob Cromer, Brad Tobin, Matt Wingrove, Delph Driz, Chad Hendricks, Dante, Christian L. Sutphin, Ryan Brower, Rune, Rikeko, Michael Hallett, Paul M. Toll, Quick Draw, Zods, Covey Smith, James Cody Halley, Spielrahu, CZ, Taylor Coron, Darius Mitchell, King O'Sharks, Liam, Caleb Pretty, Tauntaun 101, Jacob Simpson, and Thomas Bowers. Thank you all very much.